I got aged out of it. It's fun. Good time. I just got, I was supposed to. Oh, yeah. 3 days. First I went to 2 and said, I thought you could tell. Stay in the room. And do that. Because I can't at the KOA in the room I'm listening. From down to
elementary school, they bring the over, and everyone's there for it. It's amazing. It's amazing. There's usually 40 to 50 children that we feed every day.
Okay. That's like a minute behind. I thought you reset that thing.
This room is cursed.
I know. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll start the work session. Mr. Pope?
Mr. Brazell.
Here.
Dr. Houghton.
Yes.
Mr. Farley. Mr. Fink.
Here.
Mr. Frooms.
Here.
Mr. Rich.
Here.
Mayor Goodwin.
Here.
Have a quorum.
Okay, so we're going to put Mr. Pope last, so the folks presenting the first part can leave a little earlier. So with that, Dr. Elko, you're up first.
Good evening. My name is Nicole Elko. I'm the coastal management consultant for the city. And we held a marshfront management plan open house this afternoon. And some of you attended, so you don't need one of these. Need one, take another one. Okay. What
I
you
don't have one with me, so I might need one.
What you have in your hands is, and anyone else in the audience that would like one, we have some extras. Please take one. Around. Jenna, I'll let you take those to the side if you want. Right, so you have a, what is a self-guided input flyer in your hands. This is what the attendees followed when they showed up tonight to give us stakeholder input, resident input on the marshfront management plan recommendations that we have come up with. We've briefed you on this once or twice now. Recall that we did the very first marshfront management plan in the state of South Carolina back in 2019 in the city of Folly Beach. And so we are updating that plan now. And we have done some stakeholder interviews. We've worked with the Planning Commission with various meetings. We've had experts come and talk to us about some advances that have been made over those last 5 years. And we've come up with the recommendations that were on these boards that were kind of around the city council room this afternoon. So what you will see if you take a look at this guide, if you open it up, are the 5 goals of the plan up here in the top left. There was one board for each of the goals. And we had everyone sign in and give us their address, and you can see the first board is where we were asking about where their area along the marshfront that was most of concern to them. And so you can see some of the sticky dots there that have been placed and some of the comments of what exactly they were concerned about. Then each of the following boards, we're very happy that the boards are not nice and clean anymore. They've got dots and sticky notes all over them. So we asked folks, then you can see at the top of the center page here, to kind of review the recommendations that we put forth and then place a dot next to those that they think are the highest priority. And you can see the green dots on the boards next to different types of recommendations, and then the sticky notes are kind of other ideas that we might want to consider. This one for the monitor recommendation, we were lucky to have Lee Bundrick here from the Kiowa Conservancy. He is a mapping expert. He's a whiz with GIS, and he has done a full analysis on the Folly Marsh and marshfront for us that includes a marsh decision matrix, which is looking at kind of the health of the marsh, and then just helping us decide what we should do in those different areas. He also has mapped the critical line that we measured, Elko Coastal measured after the last plan. So we now have that, and he has overlaid the 15-foot setback He has all the buildings on there, so we can see kind of like what's in compliance, what's not, all the structures around the marsh front. So the monitor element of this plan is far more advanced than the last one we did, and we're really grateful for that collaboration with Kiowa Conservancy, who's doing all this pro bono because it's in their organization's interest and mission to conserve marshes. Right, and then this is the one I probably wanted to point out to you the most, and this is our protect recommendation. Sorry to block you out there. If you recall, adjusting the local regulatory framework is something that we're proposing here. We really want to make sure to highlight this. So we discussed at great length the 15-foot setback from the marsh the last time we did this plan, and it was agreed to do that. We did pass an ordinance, but what was a bit contentious was what to do about the bulkheads within that 15-foot setback, so we left them in. So the only thing really you can do in that setback now is to build a bulkhead. In this plan, we are recommending to remove that, not remove bulkheads, like go out and physically take them out, but just remove that from the ordinance of allowable uses within the setback. So don't allow bulkheads in the 15 feet, start them 15 feet and back. But within that 15 feet, include nature-based erosion control options, right? So don't just take away all of the private property owners' options to protect their property, right? Allow for things like nature-based solutions, living shorelines, vegetative buffers like you see pictured there. And there are some products out there now that weren't really around when we did the first one that are more, they're harder, and if you think about it, they're like a wall of sandbags, but it's still kind of a soft solution. So there are a lot of different options kind of along a spectrum now that we're recommending. Don't allow bulkheads in there, but do give property owners options. And we'll get into some more details about that and give you some specific recommendations here moving forward. So those are really the ones I wanted to highlight specifically. We talked also about restoration options. Because the state of South Carolina is not really restoring marshes yet, this is all very forward thinking. So we talk a lot here about collaborating with the other organizations. You see all of their logos on there. Thank you, Erin. And then finally, the last recommendation is adapt, and this is, pulling in all the other city plans, the Folly 2050 planning for water, making sure our plans are all talking to each other. You saw a permeable surfaces recommendation on one of those boards, for example, so making sure that we're consistent amongst them and looking forward ahead at the rising waters and planning for the best thing for the city overall. So that's where we are with the engagement session. I thought it went really well. I would have loved to have some more people show up, but this isn't the sexiest topic, so this is what we get. So if you have additional input, if you weren't able to make it, if you know someone who cares about the marsh front that wasn't able to make it, please send them my way. I'd love to talk with them. We have interviewed like 35 people also, so it wasn't just the people who showed up tonight. We are going to take these recommendations back, use the input to prioritize them and reorder them, draft up a plan, and ideally come back to you at a future work session with a final draft plan to walk through the specifics. If there are any questions, I'm happy to address those now.
Thank you for all the hard work. It's always nice to be the first in the state, and it keeps us from getting too much complaints about not being in the beach management plan. We don't want to advertise that too much, but we have to keep ahead of the curve just so Folly Beach looks good leading the pack. And just think, if you live along a marsh and you think, or the world, I guess we're
All of us do.
If you live along the, well, not all of us, some of us, I got a marsh because it comes inside the island, but some people don't. But if you live along a marsh and you think you need to do something to protect your property, start thinking about those natural buffers, because that 15 foot can mean a world of difference. And most of the houses, I would dare say without looking at that GIS map, are probably in that 15-foot setback. So,
Well, there were a lot of them.
yeah, so think about that as a community.
And one other one, sorry, you reminded me, Mayor, that I wanted to point out was including interior marshes in all of the efforts that we're doing. So when we mapped the marsh front critical line in 19, we only mapped kind of like the river fronting marshes, but there are several interior marshes as well that function very similarly, and when we have flooding, they kind of connect to the marsh. So
I can't fit in a marsh.
our recommendation, Mayor, for those is to monitor, map, and regulate them as we do the
Yeah, I
open
thought,
water marshes.
well, I know DHEC does, well, they don't call themselves DHEC anymore, but, they will monitor you real quick, even if it is an interior marsh. So it is very important to take all marshes in consideration.
And are all your options going to include all those marshes, right? Like
Correct.
the different
Yes.
vegetation things, moisture beds, even things that'll,
Absolutely, right. And incentive programs like vegetation giveaways, right, that would apply to all of the marshes.
So,
Smart.
so one thing we need to work with the state with is, and maybe they won't going forward, to fill an interior marsh was a lot easier than fill in an exterior marsh. But the problem with that is, and we've seen this over and over and over again, those marshes were acting as holding pots for floodwaters or a lot of rainwater or whatever. But once you fill them in, it's like everywhere else in the world, the water's got to go somewhere. So that would be maybe in consideration to see what we could do with those guys saying, hey, y'all need to start monitoring that critical line a little better on the interior marshes.
Yeah, they're like natural retention ponds.
Yeah.
I'll add that to the comments. Great. Thank you.
Tim, is that like Sunset Lane down here where we've got the original road was going over marsh?
And Aaron Pope did a great job with engaging the visitors as they arrived. Thank you.
No, I think more like shadow mix. See, that marsh that's behind my house comes in between
Yeah.
those two pieces of land. But the one on the corner shadow mix, they got built in the middle of the house, used to hold thousands of gallons of water. Now it don't. Okay. Y'all, excuse me, inside conversation, y'all are up next.
Alright, so my name is Dr. Deffinger, and I am a professor over in at the Citadel in the Civil Engineering Department. And I taught a course this semester on intro to environmental engineering. And I had done some research before on Folly. I don't know if you guys remember me, it's been a while. But I reached out to Aaron just because I was trying to get the students more engaged with the local community and just, how we can learn together and get everyone more involved. And I think Aaron had told me to contact Jenna, and that's when I heard that we were putting in, or you guys were putting in a kind of a sample living shoreline, and talking about with Weston Samsa was going to be the engineer, and they were thinking of creating an educational guidebook for the residents to learn more about what a living shoreline is, the costs and the benefits. So I ended up having our class here. I broke them up into 5 different groups and had them write a memo to the city talking about the different costs and benefits associated with the living shoreline. So the students kind of learn a lot about it, and then hopefully this can be used for the city as well. But I wanted the students to get a chance to talk a little bit about what they learned. And so this is Grady and Jackson, and they are rising seniors over at the Citadel.
Hey,
So Grady and Jackson, I'm gonna tell you, y'all have much, much nicer instructors than we used to have.
so just a little bit of background. So a living shoreline, essentially, so you start off with some sort of structure down to promote oyster growth, and then behind that, once oysters start taking place and growing, developing, it allows sediment to build up behind it, which then brings your marsh level up, and so then that usually allows your marsh grass to come in and take over. And so it kind of, once you get it started with putting the structures down, kind of allows the ball to get rolling, and allows the marsh to kind of almost protect itself. There's a lot of different benefits for it. One, erosion control, as kind of previously mentioned, but those waves, or the marsh grass prevents, waves, boats, and just wind and natural waves that if those crashing on the shoreline will erode it, but that marsh grass helps slow it down, even the oyster beds And then also like, you know, recreation, if you have oyster beds and marsh grass rather than just plain old bluff mud, you probably get more fish and whatnot. You see natural wildlife and whatnot. You can see. So there's basically like 3 kinds of structures that are used for the oyster growth. There's what they call oyster castles, which are almost kind of like cinder blocks that you just kind of place out there, and eventually the oysters kind of make their way based on like the materials of the oyster castles. It kind of sends out a signal almost to like the oyster. I think it's called the gametes that like float through the water. That's probably not the right word, but they kind of float through the water and they kind of get those signals based on the calcium carbonate that comes off of it. And then there's also manufactured wired reefs, which is kind of like a wire structure, and they put old oyster shells in there. Like people who manufacture them usually get recycled from restaurants or whatnot. But they put those, like used oyster shells for like people eat. They put them in there and then it sends those signals out as well. And then also, there's also just mesh bags that you fill with oyster shells, maybe put them on a pallet or something, put them down in the bluff mud, and eventually the oysters will start growing on top of them and allow sand and whatnot to build behind it, allow the marsh to take place. And then Jackson's gonna kind of talk about the field trips we went on and whatnot.
Yeah, so we went on 2 field trips as a class this semester. First field trip was to DNR over there in James Island, and they kind of showed us like how they make, because they put out a lot of reefs, and they showed us how they make them and like what's the best cost benefit, where are they wasting the least oysters. So they showed us the oyster bags, but they said this is the most, like the easiest way to do it, but they also waste like 60 to 70% of oysters, because the oysters on the inside of that bag never get attached to, it's just the oysters on the outside. So then they came up with the manufactured wire reef. It was a guy there that kind of came up with the idea, and it takes a lot more man hours, but you're wasting a lot less oysters, and it's more sustainable. And then the third way that they taught us was they use like old cages, like crab pots, maybe old crab pots, and they just spray like plaster on it with this infused with calcium carbonate, and that it's not as effective as actual oysters, but it attracts oysters as well. And then they plant the grass and promote the grass to grow behind, and it pushes up the shoreline. And then we went to we came here, and Weston Sampson, what was her name? Liz from Weston Sampson showed us the plans, and she was like real excited to show us the plans, because it's kind of the first time this has ever been done. And it was kind of nice going from DNR, seeing how they actually put them together, and then seeing how Folly Beach is going to put them to use and educate the locals around, and kind of influence them to not put so many gray structures up with seawall and stuff, and influence them to put more of like a living shoreline instead of all these berms and gray structures and stuff.
And also kind of the benefit, I mean, for the most part, they're kind of just set it, forget it, if you will. You know, you put down a couple of structures, promote oyster growth, and you can help out and plant grass if you want to, but also if you just let it take its course over a couple of years, it'll develop itself. You know, you really don't have to do that much maintenance or whatnot with it, unless you want it to be developed faster.
Okay, I got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
It'll make it hard for you. So the oyster growth is great on the outside, but what do you do to preserve inland marshes? Like I was talking about mine. So mine doesn't grow oysters. It doesn't grow barnacles, because most of the time there's no water there. But it does promote a lot of grass growth, which collects a lot of wildlife, especially on the little things. Have you all studied anything about promoting those for your class next time, promoting those kind of shorelines?
No, we have not.
Good answer. It's all her fault, but you didn't know that, right?
Next time.
I have a quick question. I know DNR collects the used oyster shells.
Yes, sir.
You know, at the boat landing in different places. Are they collecting enough, do you think?
No, that's actually one of the things.
They're always looking for one.
Because I know it was brought up, I think, somewhere collecting here on the island. I think I saw a memo or something. Do you think if we did something, an oyster shell collection somewhere on the island, like we do composting, that it would be beneficial? to something like this?
I know,
They have tons of dump trailers and they just come pick them up, round them up from restaurants. So
Yeah.
yeah, I know DNR would definitely, if you don't want to get
Like at the
involved
boat landing or
They,
somewhere?
yeah, they definitely, I know, probably love to hear that, because they said the oyster show is probably the most expensive part of it. Because if they don't get enough donations, they have to go buy it from somewhere, it's usually out of state.
Don't they have to be bleached and everything for a year or something? They gotta sit out in the sunlight?
Yeah, they do have to sit them out, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a long process,
Yeah,
but I
like-
think, I was gonna say, one of the groups did look into oyster recycling, so I think that was one of the memos, and I sent that over to the DNR. And I do think a couple restaurants around here do, but I think they could always use it,
And there's no state incentives right now for recycling.
and that's kind of what they were talking about, there's really no incentive to the restaurant or to the community.
Well, even residents, I know, because we,
Yeah.
eat them, and what do you do with them?
Right.
You take them to Solid Green.
You go to
I
Solid.
tell you what I do, that's what I do, but I gotta go down Alpha Island and do that, which isn't bad, it's a beautiful drive, but, anyway, so.
Yes, sir. Well, no further questions. Thank y'all for y'all's time.
Thank you. And thanks for, working with us. We appreciate it.
For sure.
If I might, Aaron, that is one of the recommendations of the plan, Mr. Grooms, is to put an oyster recycling trailer at our Folly Beach boat ramp, and we're talking with Fab at their next meeting to see how many restaurants are doing it, if they're going to Soul Agree to kind of
Okay,
figure out
cool.
what the demand
So
is.
sort of, okay, perfect.
Right, and what the guys were just talking about is pictured here, of a volunteer group putting out the oyster cages that they were mentioning over at Mingo Point on Key Oahu.
How
So
heavy are those things?
they're pretty airy, and they make them on site, right? They're like 2 layers of, imagine a crab pot with 2 layers. The whole
Right.
bottom layer is open,
Right.
and it's expected to settle, and then the inside is oysters around the outside and like some
Okay.
organic material in the middle.
Cool.
So,
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So to switch gears, I'd like to talk to you guys about our parking contract negotiations, just to give you guys an update. Last month, you gave first reading to some changes to our ordinance. You've got that up for second reading tonight, and you want to follow it up as soon as possible with a contract amendment to reflect the content of the new ordinance and rearrange the pay structure, how they are paying us. And so we started out with the Isle of Palms contract and our contract, and we're going through it kind of line by line. And much like the ordinance, the Isle of Palms contract contains a lot of the same concepts as our contract. It's just, it's newer, shinier, and beefier, basically. And so what I propose to the parking folks is, if we substitute some of the really city-specific things like their pay rate, description of the parking system, are they good with the same terms and language that IOP uses just at Folly Beach? And then they are. And so I had Joe and Eric and Andrew and Lee all look at it, and we're all in agreement that the Isle of Palms contract is a good model, and it really touches on and reinforces several important points related to the ordinance amendment and related to the lawsuits and just kind of the general concept. It's about 14 pages, single space, small font, so we won't go through the whole thing. But I do want to just highlight, for you guys and for the public, some of the important pieces of it that I think are going to be really good for us going forward, just to further clarify parking contractors' role, our role, and how parking tickets, which I'll just refer to as parking citations, interact with paid parking revenues. The interaction of those revenues is kind of really what this is all about. So I've got about 11 things I want to point out. We've got a contract, and we'll definitely email it to you guys so you can see it. And next month, we hope to have a final version for you. The one thing that's kind of still in the air, and I'll just start with this one, is the compensation rate. Right now, those guys pay us a flat payment that is not tied to increases, decreases in their revenue. They collect parking citations, they collect paid parking, they pay us a flat fee out of that, of $1.2 million. So we're restructuring it to segregate all of the citation money completely out of the picture for them. It comes straight to us. and then they'll keep the paid parking money and pay us the fee out of that. In discussions with Lee and the contractor, we do think that the contract renewal, the paid parking expansion that you guys gave us the green light on to add those 80 spaces on street this year, it's probably the time, and you know, our neighbors have done it, they've increased their rates, probably the time for us to also increase our rates. So that's why we don't have a final version for you tonight, because we're still kind of going back and forth about proposed fee increases and how we would structure those. We know that they would only apply for now for paid parking lots. DOT has to approve all of our paid parking changes on the street. And right now, we don't think it's time right now to adjust the rates for the parking spaces on the street, especially since we're going to increase the supply by 80 spaces this year. But we are looking at parking rates, possibly different weekend and weekly rates, kind of loosely based on the IOP model. Their model is really complex, well, at least in my opinion, it's kind of complex. Lee and I had some discussions about it. It's, you know, on Tuesday at 10 o'clock, you pay something different than you do on Thursday at 8 o'clock, which is different from Saturday at 2 o'clock. For me, it's a little more complex, but the idea of customizing the rates to the time of the week and possibly the time of the year, I think that is something we can look at. And so Lee did a really great job. He modeled out two rates. It came in pretty close to what the contractor did. So we're working on a hybrid rate. So when we come back to you, we will have a new rate proposal to increase the rates for paid parking in the paid parking lots. And they will be variable to some degree depending on the day of the week. That's as far as we
Thought I
got.
had it turned off, sorry.
But it will not be surge pricing, burial demand pricing. You know, it won't be a flow chart. You know, it's something that everyone can learn and easily remember when they come to the beach.
And the software they're using to do ticketing, it'll accommodate that.
So we gave them our numbers, they gave them their numbers, and we're gonna come back. But we do think that we will basically, if the revenue comes in, you know, if parking holds up the way it has the last few years, we'll be close to revenue neutral for changing the way we keep all payments. So that'll be the big thing.
What kind of a percentage increase are you looking
Lee, I know that
at? Any
hard
ROM on
numbers-
that, or?
Yeah, it's,
Go ahead.
I mean, as far as, we're looking at a daily rate increase of about,
It's like $1.
yeah, $1 an hour kind of thing. And then weekend rate would change from, I think our maximum rate for, those right now is $10.50 per day, which I think is a bit low. So we're proposing maybe, $15 per day during weekdays, weekends, and, something like, what was it?
They're not gonna double.
No.
They're not gonna double or anything crazy.
Probably a
like that.
third or so.
Well, it depends, I think it depends on negotiations
And
too.
what we'll probably do is we'll come back to you guys, and we'll have option A, option B, option C. But we believe that even at any option, we're gonna still break even in terms of our budget. What we were getting from them as our flat payment, we'll still be getting a roughly equivalent amount. And we're gonna talk about this, I'll just bring it in now. One thing that distinguishes us from the Isle of Palms is these guys staff an office here during the week, and they also clean the restrooms for us, several public bathrooms. So they have a cost here that they don't have at the Isle of Palms. So you're not gonna see them turning over the same percentage of their revenue because they've got higher costs. So, but we'll have a couple options for you next month, and hopefully that'll be the last thing. But then, got plenty of time, so, just to walk through some points here. This contract is crystal clear in multiple places. That is the city that makes the rules for parking. We say what's a violation, we say what the penalty is, we say when it should be applied, we set the rates. We determine everything about parking enforcement, not the contractor. If the contractor gets their instructions from us, they cannot deviate. This is just to reinforce the idea that we view this as a ministerial duty. It is gonna be actively supervised by the city. Basically, they can't do anything we don't give them permission to do, and they acknowledge that as part of their contract. The contract will more closely model the ordinance. Basically, every major concept in the ordinance will be embedded into the contract that we all sign. It's enforced. The first term is for 1 year, and then it renews annually, option to renew annually, ongoing. Either party can choose not to renew. So we'll put us on 1-year terms, which is a little bit different than how we're doing it now, but we figure that gives both parties the flexibility to change course if needed. The initial term is a year, and every term after that is a year. Multiple places in here, we've got contractors that have no discretionary authority in the interpretation or application of city ordinances. So there's a question, what does tires on the pavement mean? It goes through to Andrew. There's a question of how far away do you have to be from a parking or fire hydrant? Goes through Andrew or the city. They don't get to interpret the laws. If there's any gray area, they will come to us. They will ask their advice. And an important piece of that, and it's just got to keep saying it so everyone internalizes it. This does mean that all parking ticket appeals will now go through our court. They're already eligible to go through our court. People at any moment today, under the current contract, under the current provisions, can take their parking ticket to court. As a convenience factor, we've been allowing people to first appeal to the parking contractor to save everyone some time, money, and effort. But just to clear up any misconception that the parking folks are the judge and the jury and the ticket writer, we're removing their ability to review tickets unless it's just a clear, this is not my car. This is a blue Buick, not a red Cadillac. But any other question will now go through court. So we will see some increased volume in court, but I do think it's important so that the wider world realizes that every ticket is appealable and it all goes through a regular city process. Just like now, but formally written into the contract. The relationship and management fee, I kind of talked on that. Along with the parking ticket money, that's also boot fees. Basically, any sort of financial penalty money will come to us directly. The parking contractor gets no share of it. So it's not just parking tickets, it's booting fees. Any other fee they charge folks, it goes to us, just to keep those separately accounted for. Another thing that's in our current ordinance, it's in the new ordinance a little more fully, and it will be in the contract, is that all their employees will be specifically appointed by public safety as code enforcement officer. Each employee will be trained with a public safety approved training program to go over how the city interprets their ordinances, what their instructions are. We will now officially give that to them. Andrew will officially have the power to appoint any of their employees, and Andrew will have officially the power to unappoint. I don't know what the opposite of appoint is. To remove someone, take away their appointment as a code enforcement officer. Andrew will, we already do receive the background checks, but Andrew will specifically have the action to act on, or the power to act on background checks. All that's just reiterating that these folks are not independent in the sense that they act with no guidance or supervision from the city. So, and that includes the training. When we'll also make sure their uniforms clearly mark them as city related, so they won't just be parking enforcement third-party uniforms. There'll be something tying them back to the city of Folly Beach, just to remind folks who get a ticket or interact with them. These guys are supervised and managed by the city, and they have folks who interact with them have a right to come to the city with any complaints or tickets. And Andrew has the right to direct them, their enforcement priorities, etc. So if Andrew says, we really need you guys down on the 10th block next week because there's an event, that's okay because the city directed it. It was not the contractor, looking for business, so to speak. Talk about them going to court. Talk about their operating expenses. And those are really, the highlights. Everything else here is already in our current ordinance or contract, and so we'll send this to you guys for your review. But I just wanted to say that again, we're revising the contract, yes, to officially segregate the payments. That's different, because right now we don't do that. But everything else in here is just a strengthened version of what we already do. I can't say that enough. We already treat these guys as non-discretionary. We already provide guidance whenever there is a question on interpreting our parking ordinances. We already allow folks to come to court. So So these are not new concepts for us that we're doing in response to anything. We're just taking advantage of this opportunity of splitting the fee to beef up the language and restate clearly what our relationship is with the contractor. And that, hopefully we'll have those rates for y'all next month, and you can decide which one you like the most, we'll fill it in, and you guys can approve the contract.
Double it.
Quick question. How's that gonna affect our window downstairs? That's the parking window. Does it have any effect at all on people
They'll-
walking in?
They'll still be there, or their shirt might say Folly Beach parking, you
Right.
know? But yeah, they'll still be there, same hours, same thing. They will still hire that person, but that person's employment will be subject to review by us and supervision by us. Training.
Okay.
No other questions? You got 10 minutes.